Well, hello there, and welcome to another episode of The Working Ant with me, your host and coach, Rami Balut. What a pleasure it is to be with you. It's a beautiful week here in the Bay Area. We've been experiencing just some nice sunshine over the weekend, and that's always a good thing, because we know, as far as most people are concerned, there's another storm coming. So just getting used to this new reality here in California of just pockets of sunshine, and then all of a sudden, boom, there's another storm right around the corner. The new reality we are living in. That aside, I really, really hope you're doing well. I hope you're in great spirits. I hope you're healthy. Hope you're excited about the future. And most importantly, I hope you are on the path, on the journey of living out your best self, really living out your best self, because isn't that the most beautiful thing to do? And isn't that actually deserving of you? Yours truly, your proud host and coach here would tend to think so. I obviously would hope you do as well. Today is an interesting topic of conversation, really around the idea of perception. And it is such a powerful, powerful thing when we sort of look at things from a different lens, a different perspective of things. We talked about optics of opportunity the last time around. Well, I think that was like last week, actually, we spoke about that. And so, just having these optics of looking at things from a different lens, like how much opportunity that actually can create for us in our interactions, in our engagements, in our conversations, etc., of course. But today, what an amazing sort of way of just looking at things from an all-time different level here. So we're upping things here, upping our strategy, upping our level, upping our game, upping our approach to life, and our experience of life. And isn't that just a blessing? It truly, truly is. At least I would believe so. Today is a question that I'm going to ask you. Again, all around perception. Are you just beginning, or are you near the end? Are you just beginning, or are you near the end? I'm getting used to these hand gestures here on my YouTube channel if you're watching me there, at Coach Rami. Otherwise, I'm just so happy to see you here on my weekly podcast here on The Working Ant. Are you just beginning, or are you near the end? I think that's a question that many people are feeling these days. I would imagine you are as well. And if you're not thinking about things from that perspective, well, today is going to change things for you. I'm going to encourage you to do precisely just that, because, if we look at things from what it is that we are doing, the perspective of ourselves professionally, of course, we may be looking at something where we are closing it out, nearing the end of it to move on to something else, or we may be looking at something, right at the near beginning of something else. So if I'm going to be closing something out today, I could be thinking about, well, am I nearing the end of this, closing it out, or am I right about to open the door to something else? And where my focus goes there, where my perspective goes there, my attitude, where that goes there, that's going to affect my entire experience of how I'm going to do the work, how I'm going to do things meaningfully or not so meaningfully, how I'm going to feel a level of joy in what it is that I do. Or if I'm, not 100% sure about where it is I'm going, I possibly, and we talked about this before here on The Working Ant, we possibly can burn out even quicker because we don't actually have clarity on where we're going, why we're doing this, what's it all for, et cetera, et cetera. But if you were to look at your life today, your professional life, and you would ask yourself like, hey, am I near the beginning of something, or am I actually like near the end of it? And I want you to just really understand the nature of why it is I'm proposing that you ask yourself such a question, and why that is actually so meaningful. If we view ourselves as starting something, it is radically different than viewing ourselves as closing something out, nearing the end of it. And vice versa. If we are viewing things as closing something out, a chapter has to close, we may be looking at something radically different of starting something new. Right at the beginning of it. And by the way, there's no positive or negative thing here. I'm not trying to sort of get you into a sort of bias here. I'm actually doing the opposite, really. At least my attempt to do so is debunking some biases over something closing and how we feel about that, or something beginning and how we feel about that as well. And I think it's so important for us to take a look at things from this perspective, because it really changes so much of our experience and what it is that we do for ourselves in the limited time we have in this career life that we've been given. And so if you look at yourself from the perspective of starting something new, you may be in a state right now that is radically different in responding to that question than you probably would as early as next week, as early as tomorrow, for some, as early as, in a couple of hours. It all just depends on our mood. And mood is a real thing, by the way. And it affects so much of our experience of how we actually view things that we may be reactive to, the effort that we actually have to make and take towards something we want to pursue, so being proactive here, and also our experience of things we certainly just can't control, like this macroeconomic climate and all these things that are happening in this world, totally outside of our control, right? But if we look at things from a lens of a question, and today, precisely in this moment, I'm going to ask you, like, hey, are you looking at yourself in this exact moment as starting something new? Or are you looking at something as like closing something out, nearing the end of it? And I don't want to create a certain dilemma here. It doesn't have to be one or the other, but it could be somewhere in between. But for the purposes of today, I want you to look at it from one or the other, if I may ask you to do so. And so, if you're looking at your career at this moment in time, are you at the beginning of something new? Are you at the cusp of a breakthrough, a cusp of innovation, a cusp of understanding, a cusp of transition perhaps to a career that you are aspiring towards, or perhaps internally in your own role? Are you feeling like a feeling of enlivening, where you can pursue something in the realm of your organization, in the realm of your company, without having to go too far away? How do you feel about that? Does that overwhelm you? Does that inspire you? Does that motivate you? Do you feel more anxiety starting something new? Do you feel that, hey, this is the right time for me to start something new, and thus I must close out another chapter in order for me to primarily focus on what is new and move forward? And conversely, if we're thinking about, hey, are we closing something off? Are we near the end of something? And we think about things from that perspective. How does that make you feel? Do you say to yourself like, oh my gosh, oof, I am so glad I am done with that. Please, I just want to set it and forget it, rotisserie style, or set it, forget it, let it burn, and let it burn completely, because you just want it out of your life, right? But and you may actually feel like, you know what? I'm sad to close this thing. I don't want to close this thing. I want to stick around. I don't want to have to go through this radical change in my life. I'm not ready for that. I'm ready for routine. I may be in a situation where it may be, not the most joyful and at times quite painful, but that routine, hey, that's for me. I'm okay with that. And that level of predictability and routine is something that I'm really looking forward to have in my life. All things considered here, I think it's really fair that you ask yourself that question. Are you near the beginning of something, or are you near the end? And if you're able to sort of think in between the lines of the perspective of that, of what that can actually do for you in thinking along those lines, well, it could change your experience of what it is you're doing today, how you feel in your interactions with it. If it could excite you, or it could tell you hey, you know what? You probably should be looking somewhere else. Or you may feel to yourself hey, I'm not ready to let go of this. I've got something good here, and I want to work harder to preserve it and to promote myself along the way in that process. I think that's a very, very fair ask. It's a very, very fair way of looking at things from a different angle. And if we're able to look at things from a different angle, oh my gosh, we have a different language with ourselves. We have a different experience altogether. We have a different emotional state and how we're feeling about it. I think it's just high time that you ask yourself a question like this, because it'll just change your direction of where you're actually going. In fact, if you're unable to actually have direction today in your life, it may provide direction altogether for you. And that in itself is a beautiful thing. It's a blessing to know where you're going. It's a blessing to actually have direction. It's a blessing to know that you have the tools, the efficacy, the aptitude to actually head in that direction and achieve it, or have a very good chance at achieving it. And so being able to ask questions like this, I think, is just really, really imperative over our experience of life. And you deserve to ask yourself a question like this. Why? Because it can actually save you from looking at something that could be perceived immediately like as negative, where it could be something completely positive and good for you and nourishing for you. You could view something as completely positive, that, hey, you know what, I'm beginning something. But you also may look at it where, like, I have to close a chapter here. I have to close a door on something, and I can't look back. Because if I continue to look back, it's going to prevent me from moving forward. It happens a lot, especially when we're pitching a new idea, we're in an interview, we are doing calibrations, and we're talking about, hey, the journey that we've been on so far and our self-reflection and how we feel about all that. It actually promotes, just as equally as it does prevent, us from doing something positive for ourselves in our lives, primarily just because we're not asking ourselves that question. Are we near the end, or are we just beginning? And if you want to even take this further, and this is sort of like how I want you to think of things even deeper here, is that if you look at your career right now, if you look at your life right now, and you look at everything that's brought you to this moment, are you just beginning it, or are you near the end? And it brings me back to some like childhood memories where many of my clients would look at their childhood and say, my gosh, when I looked at people that were older than me and grown up, I wanted to be that because they had it all figured out. At least I had that level of perception that they had it all figured out. I wanted to be that grown up. I wanted to be independent. I wanted to go out and do my thing because at that age, at that level, had it all figured out. I want to grow up as fast as I can. And well, the reality obviously is very different today, isn't it? Many of us actually say to ourselves like, hey, you know what? I want to be a child again. I want to go through that again. I want to be able to have that level of curiosity, that level of motivation and energy, and say to myself, my gosh, I really, really, really wish I could go back to that, because back there when I was a child, I had so much hope for myself. I had so many dreams. I had so much belief that I'm going to be somebody. And that was a beautiful moment in my life. And I'm sure you may have experienced that at some point in your life where you're like, my gosh, I wish I could go back, at least to just feel my experience of life so differently than what it is today. And I believe asking yourself questions like, are you just beginning, or are you near the end of something, can actually bring you back there. It can bring you back there some way, because if you feel that you're just beginning, as you felt when you were a child, and you felt like, my gosh, this whole world is my oyster. I've got so much to do. I don't even know where to start. I'm overwhelmed, but it feels great. I'm consuming it. I'm learning. I'm getting so much out of it. My gosh, I just want to go back there. And guess what? You can. Hey, we can't turn back the time. We can't turn back the biological clock of time. We can't get past the wrinkles and the gray hairs every now and then. But and the backaches, by the way, for those that experience those, but if we go back and we think, man, what kind of a state was I as a child? And how did I feel back then? Man, that level of excitement, that level of interaction with the world, that brought so much learning. That brought so much invigorating thought. That brought so many ideas to the fold of the possibilities we could become. And I feel if we're looking at things today simply as they are, and we're saying, you know what, am I just beginning, or am I near the end? Well, you could be just beginning. You could be starting out all over again. You can say to yourself, I still got a chance. I still got something in me. There are people out there that believe that I matter, and I need to go find those people. There are people out there that understand me, and I'm going to go out and seek to be understood. Or I'm going to be that person to understand others because they want to be understood. It's such a powerful thing when we look at life from this lens. We could also be saying, you know what? This is it. It's over. I'm done with this. Can't take this anymore. Irrespective of the quality of life I've built for myself and my family, this isn't it for me. I want to be here anymore. I want to close out this chapter and start anew. And if that breeds a level of excitement for you, then so be it. You know, there are things that are good for us. There are things that are convenient for us. There are things we must do. I think this is something you must do. Are you just beginning? Or are you near the end? And if you look at every small thing in life, tactically, probably not going to get the most out of a statement like that. But if you look deep down at what's important to you, what it is that you value, then you'll get much, much closer. I can promise you that. If you think of something so important to you, what is now, what once was, what will be in the future, if you think of what's important to you and you ask yourself, hey, how do I need to be in that moment? Do I need to end that to start something new? Or do I need to feel like I'm just starting out again and I need to be in a state where I'm open and I'm accepting of what is to come from the level of effort, from the level of dedication, from the level of commitment, from the level of knowledge that I need to have, or the knowledge that I'm willing to learn, the conversations I'm willing to have, get closer to what it is that I want. I mean, for God's sake, I mean, you owe yourself a question like that. And you owe yourself a response. And the closer you can get to finding clarity in between the weeds of what matters to you, what truly matters, and how you choose to interact with your life accordingly, based primarily on the structure of those questions. Are you just beginning? Or are you near the end? My gosh, how much that could actually give perspective and focus and frame to the life that you are wanting to have, wishing to preserve, yearning to be different. Whatever you're at right now, whatever state you're at, whatever space you're at, whatever shit is going on, you've got to look at things from the perspective of, hey, you know what? It's just at the beginning for me? Because I got this beat in my head and it's not going away. Am I just near the end of something right now? Should I be exploring other opportunities? Should I close this door so I can open up another? What door should I be closing? What does that actually mean if I close this door? Do I just jump and learn how to swim somewhere else? Or do I surround myself with people, invest my time with people that are willing to support some of those motivations, willing to support some of my fears around it, willing to add structure to it, an understanding around it, getting myself into a place where I can alter my perspective on life, be provided opportunities, know where to go, know where to grow, understand that, hey, you know what? My attitude around where I'm at right now, how I feel about where I'm at right now, how I feel about where I'm going, how I feel about this exact moment, all of that is actually going to play a big part. You know, your life is very much influenced by the decisions you make, but it also is very much impacted by your experience of it and your interaction with it and your attitude coming into it. And that is your choice. That is your choice. But at times, you know, you just need some level of interruption, some level of disruption, where you're thinking to yourself like, hey, you know what? I got to look at things from a different lens here, from a different perspective. If I want to do something different, if I want to be somebody to myself that is different, if I want to grow, I don't want to stay where I'm at. if I want to preserve perhaps where I'm at, but do so in the most compelling and infectious way to myself, to the people that are around me, to motivate and inspire, to influence, to sway, to deepen my relationships with those around me, adding some structure to how you view your life will get you very, very far. And not only will it get you far, it'll get you focused. And that's where I want you to be right now. I want you to be in a focused place where you're understanding that, hey, you know what? Maybe I am on the cusp of something beginning, something that's just starting. Maybe at the tail end of an expiration date that either should have ended now, should have ended a long time ago, possibly should end a couple of years on out. And I need to act accordingly. Because if we don't act accordingly and listen to that voice and we suppress it, and we seem to feel that, hey, you know what, our aspirations are for somebody else. They're not for me. Well, then, that's giving up on ourselves. And I won't allow that for you. I hope you don't allow that for yourself. Remember, this life is so short. You've seen it all the time. There's so many reminders of it. I swear, I am so nervous to open up and read the news, even though I've been doing my utmost best not to. But there's just so many things going on in this world. It's like, how can I not be a part of being in the know? But that stuff just sucks you in. And that wealth of information that's out there is just preventing us from being the guardians of our minds and truly, truly filtering out what is just trash and garbage versus what truly matters. And what truly matters is who you see in the morning, who you interact with, how you feel about yourself at the end of the day, the last thoughts you have before you go to sleep. It's these things that matter. And for us to get closer to doing the things that matter, to capitalizing on the rewards of doing something that matter, I think we should just give a pause for perspective here. Are you just beginning, or are you near the end? And that's it for this week on The Working Ant with me, your host and coach, Rami Balut. Please take care of yourself, take care of one another, and I'll see you next week. Thank you so much for investing your time with me. Bye for now.